This week on The Insiders, when it comes to Iowa's state auditor, he wants to know, do you want someone who's loyal to the governor in office, or do you want someone who's elected as a partisan but serves independently? Well, we'll listen to what the governor said about needing a new state auditor, and we'll hear from the auditor who says what the governor said about him is just not true. And inflation ticked down a bit from a year ago, but it is still making too many things way too expensive. So we asked Senator Grassley that if Democrats' overspending caused problems with prices rising so much, then why shouldn't states give back some of those COVID-19 relief tax dollars? And we'll get an explanation from an Iowa state senator who had claimed that a school in his district had to put a kitty litter box in the student's bathroom.
From your local election headquarters, this is The Insiders with Dave Price.
The leader of Iowa's taxpayer watchdog has something to say about Iowa's governor. But before we get to Auditor Rob Sand, though, we need to turn back the clock a bit to last Saturday. And here is Governor Kim Reynolds talking to supporters as she opened her re-election campaign headquarters.
Please. And I need a state auditor that's not trying to sue me every time they turn around. Focus on your office.
So she did not say the Democrats Tom Miller and Rob Sand by name in that clip, but Sand says the governor calling him out like that is wrong for a few reasons.
Number one, the only public entity in the state of Iowa that we have sued is the University of Iowa, which is probably the state's most liberal institution. So it wasn't accurate to say that we were suing her. Number two, focusing on my office is auditing other offices. So by our nature in the work that we do, we look at other offices. That is literally the job description. But there's a bigger issue there, Dave, and the bigger issue to me is we've got to change what we're doing. The idea that someone would say that they want my, attorney general. The place that we are in is such a bad place where we have forgotten that our entire system of government is founded on the idea that we can solve our problems together without breaking into teams that hate each other. And I go back to the founders, and almost every one of them, with some words or some other words, had warnings about partisanship. John Adams's quote is the most powerful one. He said, "The greatest evil possible under our Constitution is two great parties united only in their hatred of each other." And I think that we are living Adams' nightmare right now.
All right, so you didn't sue her, but could she be talking about the fact that you've had critical things your office about stuff she's done, like that one campaign that used her in it?
Yeah, look.
The way she spent COVID money.
We're the auditor. Again, our job is to point out where things are done incorrectly. Who goes to the doctor and says, "Just tell me the good news. Don't tell me anything else. I only want to hear the good news," right? You expect your auditor to have some things to say that are not the happiest things. The flip side of it, though, is that we have also defended Governor Reynolds in occasions where there has been some controversy about things that's happened. The most simple example has been the COVID data, where a lot of people speculated, hey, why are these cases getting added weeks or months ahead of time? Were you suppressing them back then to keep the rates low? Yeah, that's right. Sorry, afterwards. And we looked at the data and we said, no, that's not happening here. And we didn't just release that report and then be done with it. I have repeatedly, when I have found that misperception, when I have found that conspiracy theory, I have repeatedly rebutted it. Because the only way, Dave, that we get away from this stuff, you and I were just talking about this a minute ago, it has to be Democratic leaders telling Democrats, knock it off. Cut it out, that's not true. It has to be Republican leaders telling Republicans, cut it out, knock it off, that's not true. Because the only thing we get when we tell the other side that they need to not cut it out is more hatred and more anger. And if we're not checking our own party's excesses, then we have a real hard time actually lowering the temperature of our politics and getting to the place where we can solve problems again.
So when you're talking, do you talk about this stuff at fundraisers and such, party events, all that kind of stuff, and how does that go over?
Honestly, most people, I think they find it refreshing. There are a lot of people, Dave, who are in the Democratic Party and to the left of the Democratic Party, especially on Twitter, who really don't like hearing it, who call me all kinds of nasty names. The most polite of which I can repeat, I think, on the air is dweeb. Somebody told me I was a dweeb for doing this, so whatever. My mom still likes me. But I think there's a lot of people who want this, who want to find a place politically where we can just try to focus on facts and what was said as opposed to who said it, right? And so there's some piece of that I think is received positively. When I go to Democratic events, a great example was the district conventions maybe a year ago. It was a virtual convention. It turns out that James Lynch from the Gazette was on the line. I didn't realize it was an open press event. But what came out of it was me reminding Democrats of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote. Fight for what you believe in, but do it in a way that makes people want to join you, right? I don't go out there and I don't throw red meat. I might tell the truth. But the truth is that we have to find our ways to engage with people that actually is convincing them as opposed to condescending to them.
The word fight, I had an email from a viewer right before we did the 3rd district debate with the 3 Republicans running. And his question, which we didn't end up getting into the debate, was he doesn't like the word fight and he doesn't like candidates or elected officials who use the word fight. And he said that you are elected to serve, not to fight.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
I like to use the word work. When I'm quoting Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she used the word fight. But if you're fighting in a way that makes people want to join you, I think that inherently helps people understand that the idea here is that you're trying to do something proactive. Our politics has just become this tug of war, where we're not actually moving forward, we're just going back and forth and back and forth. And it doesn't solve problems. It doesn't get us to a place where things actually get improved. And so I think folks my age and younger feel like problems have stacked up and stacked up and stacked up with very little progress on them. And now we're getting to the point where one of my worries is, we've got a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old in our house. I don't want them to grow up in a state or in a country where political violence is a regular occurrence.
But we're seeing that. We saw the attack on the Capitol on January 6th of 2021. We're seeing protesters outside the U.S. Supreme Court, justices. We saw whatever percent, most people were peaceful marching with the racial justice marches, but then you had the fringe, Seattle, Portland specifically, and we had a little bit in downtown Des Moines, where you get violent, they're attacking people. There is an energy out there. What is that about, and is that a good or bad thing?
So I think there have always been people who are on the extremes. And the question is, do we have leaders that cater to the extremists and rile them up and stoke them? Or do we have people who go out and say, hey, I hear you, I understand what you're frustrated about, there's a better way?
You mentioned work. One of the the duties of your office, you've looked at some of it early on, the COVID money, right? The federal money that's come in. So the state of Iowa, once it all comes in, will get more than $9 billion. How can taxpayers be assured that this is being spent properly, and what's the accountability here? Because it's such an incredible amount of money coming in.
Well, and then that goes back to the purpose of the auditor's office. If you never criticize leadership, if you don't point out where they have screwed up, they're going to feel free to do whatever they want.
Okay, so tax cuts, if some of that money ends up backfilling tax cuts when the revenues go down, is that legit?
Well, it's appropriate legally under the law. And so if it's appropriate legally under the law, then we don't have a quibble with it. My point is more the willingness to call out powerful people and insiders in politics is the #1 qualification for someone who wants to have this job. And I did it when I was an assistant attorney general. I prosecuted Democrats and Republicans. And I've shown it now by being willing to take the University of Iowa to the Supreme Court and being willing to, on occasion when it's appropriate, criticize the governor too. Because if you don't do that stuff, then you end up with people who act with impunity, who don't think that anyone's looking. One of the best compliments I've gotten is from a guy who's a Republican in Northeast Iowa. He's been in elected office. He's a 24-year state employee. And he said, I've never seen more middle managers and bureaucrats worried about what the state auditor is going to think. And that, to me, is deterrence. That's how you keep people from misspending the money in the first place, by making sure that they know that there's a watchdog watching what they're doing.
On Twitter, you said they called you a dweeb. Are you getting, do you get pushback from people that you're trying to be this holier than thou, this is all a shtick, this is all your political identity, self-promoting, I'm taking the high road kind of thing, and it's not legit?
You know, people who are paid by Republicans to get Republicans elected say that. Typically, given that they've put their whole lives into that, I kind of discount what they have to say. When I was in college, I went to a pretty liberal institution. I actually put together a class on conservative thought. Okay? This to me is not something that is about politics. It's about truth seeking. It's about finding ways to actually get things done. And the way you get things done is by getting people who have an interest in it to see it from the same angle and to agree on what the truth is, to agree that at least these steps are things we can agree to do. There were a lot of people in college who didn't like the idea that we had put together this class on conservative thought. They thought that that was a bad idea. My reaction to them was, we should want to encounter every idea that's out there, because we should want to know where each of us in our own experience feels the truth lies.
All right, now regarding bipartisanship here, there's a new bipartisan index that comes from the Lugar Center and Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy. Remember, Dick Lugar was a Republican senator for Indiana for a long time. Well, here is how Iowa's 4 members of the U.S. House will rank out of the 435 members. Now, it looks at the number of bipartisan bills a member sponsor or co-sponsor and how much of their overall work essentially this represents. So, according to the index, it shows that Iowa's most bipartisan House member is its only Democrat in Congress, Cindy Axne of the 3rd District. She ranks 20 out of the 435. Then the Republicans from Iowa come further down the list here. You have Marionette Miller Meeks in the 2nd District. She comes in at 86. Ashley Hinson from the 1st District down at 223, and then Randy Feenstra further down. He represents the 4th, of course. He comes in 339th out of the 435 members. And if you're curious, Republican Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania, he is the most bipartisan of the members, Republican from Pennsylvania. All right, up next, whether state leaders should give back some of the federal COVID-19 relief money to try to ease inflation and overspending.